Have you ever wondered what truly existed before the very beginning? We've all heard the stories, powerful beings descending from the heavens to reshape our planet in their image. But what if the oldest records known to man tell a completely different story? Today, we're diving into the Sumerian texts to uncover what the world was like before the Anunnaki changed everything. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will look at our origins through a completely different lens. Many believe these ancient gods were simply astronauts who came here for gold. It's a fascinating theory, but the reality etched into those cracked clay tablets is far stranger, deeper, and much more chilling. Before we go any further, let me know in the comments, do you believe humanity was an artificial creation? So, settle in. Close your eyes if you're winding down for the night, or just lean back and listen. We are about to journey back to the very dawn of time. To understand this story, we have to travel 5,000 years into the past, to the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, the place historians call the cradle of civilization, ancient Sumer. This is where humanity first learned to record its thoughts, pressing reed styluses into wet clay to create the world's first scripts. For millennia, these tablets lay buried beneath the desert sands. When archaeologists finally unearthed and deciphered them, the scientific world stood still in late-found wonder. The Sumerians had recorded a meticulous history of the cosmos, the gods, and the birth of mankind. At the heart of these texts are the Anunnaki. While modern pop culture often paints them as aliens from a planet called Nibiru, the Sumerians saw them differently. To them, they were a pantheon of supreme beings who dictated the very fate of the universe. And before these gods ever ruled over man, the world underwent a series of incredible and often brutal transformations. Imagine the dawn of time, an absolute, boundless void. The ancient Sumerians believed that before our world existed, there was nothing but an infinite dark ocean. They called this primordial watery chaos Namu. Picture the scene. No stars, no sun, no ground beneath your feet, only silent, serene waters holding within them the seeds of all future life. It is very much like the state of deep sleep you drift into every night. In this primeval ocean, there were no Anunnaki, at least not the version we see in modern pop culture. No gold mines, no flying ships. There was only peace. Namu was the Great Mother, the beginning of all beginnings. It's fascinating to note that modern scientists often compare this Sumerian concept to the theory of the primordial soup from which life on Earth first emerged. It seems the people of Mesopotamia, living over 5,000 years ago, intuitively understood the nature of the universe far better than we give them credit for. And it was from this primordial silence that the world was destined to be born, a world that would later be so ruthlessly transformed. We often hear the myth that the gods arrived on a planet already formed. No Sumerian texts tell a different story. The gods themselves were born from this dark ocean. Let's start at the very beginning. Within a vast, shoreless ocean, a massive cosmic mountain began to take shape. This mountain held within it two primordial forces. The peak was the sky, known as An, and the base was the earth, called Kai. In those earliest days, heaven and earth were inseparable, locked together in a tight, eternal embrace. In this world, there was no room for light, nor for the wind. It was a realm of absolute density and perfect unity. To picture this, imagine a tightly closed flower bud. All the intricate parts are already there, but they are pressed together, waiting to bloom. From the union of sky and earth, the first gods were born. The most powerful of them was Enlil, the god of air and storms. It was he who would change this closed world forever. Now, we should clear up a common myth. Many modern esoteric theories claim that Enlil was the commander of some cosmic expedition. But the original Sumerian texts describe him quite differently, as the literal embodiment of wind, breath, and space. Born between the sky and the earth, Enlil found he had no room to move, and so he performed the first great act of creation, the Great Separation. So, what happened next in our story? Enlil, the god of the air, decided to separate his father, the sky, from his mother, the earth. Imagine a cosmic rift of epic proportions. Like a violent hurricane, Enlil forced his way between An and Kai, pushing them apart. With incredible power, the sky rose high above to form a dome over the world, while the earth remained below, stretching out into a vast plain. In the space between them, a great void opened, the very space where we live and breathe today. Enlil claimed the earth as his own, and the world took the shape of a massive hemisphere governed by a new set of rules. Light appeared, directions were set, and time began to flow. The gods started to shape this new reality, carving out rivers and raising mountains. It was an age of great construction. This is where the legendary figures we see in books and movies today finally take the stage. Naturally, the high gods claimed the best roles for themselves and ruled the heavens. Enlil governed the earth and controlled the weather, and the wise Enki took dominion over the fresh waters of the deep. But for the world to actually function, someone had to do the dirty work. To maintain cosmic order, the higher gods, the Anunnaki, created a class of subordinates known as the Igigi. These were the worker gods, and in the early days of the world, their lot was a hard one. Long before the first humans ever walked the earth, it was the Igigi who had to dig the great canals, clear the rivers of silt, grow food for the high gods, and keep the gears of the universe turning. Picture this: powerful, divine beings standing knee-deep in mud for an eternity, using heavy picks and baskets to carve out the beds of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The ancient Sumerian texts describe it vividly. When the gods, like men, bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great, the work was heavy, and the distress was much. The Igigi labored without rest for 3,600 years. This is a crucial detail because it tells us that the world before humanity was no paradise. It was a massive, grueling construction site where lesser gods worked to the point of utter exhaustion. Many modern theories claim that ancient aliens created humans for resource extraction right from the start. However, the original clay tablets are very clear. The gods first tried to do everything themselves, and that experiment was a resounding failure. As you might imagine, no labor can last forever when it brings nothing but misery. The Igigi had reached their breaking point. For thousands of years, they had been worn down by the back-breaking work of digging canals until the universe witnessed its very first labor strike. This isn't the invention of modern political scientists. It is the literal account found in the ancient Epic of Atrahasis. The lesser gods conspired together. One night they gathered their picks and shovels and hurled them into the flames, destroying the tools of their toil. It was a literal burning of bridges, born out of sheer desperation. Bathed in the glow of the fires, the furious Igigi surrounded the palace of Enlil, the supreme god, demanding to be freed from their unbearable burden. Imagine Enlil's terror. The mighty god of storms was jolted awake in the dead of night by the roar of a mob laying siege to his home. Weapons clashed and torches flickered in the dark. Enlil ordered the gates barred and called upon the other great gods for help. Anu, the lord of the heavens, descended, while Enki, the wise god of the waters, rose from the depths. They convened a grand council to decide what to do with the rebels, but they couldn't simply punish them. If they did, who would be left to dig the canals and grow the food? The gods were facing the very real threat of starvation. But what was really behind this divine decree? This was the pivotal moment when the fate of humanity was decided. At the great assembly of the Anunnaki, Enki, the god of wisdom, proposed a brilliant solution. He acknowledged that the Igigi were right. Their burden had truly become unbearable. But instead of forcing them back to work, Enki suggested creating a replacement, a new being to shoulder the labor of the gods. He called this project the creation of the Lulu, the primitive man. The design was specific, a being intelligent enough to follow complex orders, yet submissive enough to never revolt. At this point, we need to set the record straight. Popular conspiracy theories, often linked to Zecharia Sitchin, claim that humans were genetically engineered to mine gold in South Africa. However, the reality is that not a single Sumerian text mentions gold in this context. The truth is far more grounded. Humans were created solely to replace the gods in the fields. We were made to dig the irrigation canals of Mesopotamia and produce food for the divine. We weren't created as miners. We were designed to be gardeners and builders. Now, let's look at the actual creation of humanity. This is one of the most poetic yet haunting chapters of Sumerian mythology. Enki couldn't do it alone. He worked alongside the mother goddess Ninhursag. To craft the perfect servant, the gods decided to blend two specific ingredients, clay and divine blood. They took a rebel god named We'ila, the instigator of the uprising, and sacrificed him. It's a brutal reflection of the ancient mindset. His blood was mixed with pure clay from the primordial depths of the underground ocean. From this mixture, the mother goddess fashioned 14 figures, 7 men and 7 women. These beings possessed the physical density of the earth, but the blood of the slain god gave them a divine spirit. The Sumerians believed that it was this blood that gave humans a soul, which they called the Athemu. This is also why we can hear our own heartbeat. That rhythm was seen as the literal echo of the sacrificed god. And so humanity was born, not as a masterpiece meant to enjoy life, but as a functional tool. We were biological machines made of mud and blood, created for the sole purpose of laboring so that the gods could finally rest. As soon as the first humans were fashioned, the gods handed them pickaxes and baskets. With a sigh of relief, the Igigi retired to the heavens, leaving humanity to shoulder the burden of labor. The world changed once more. Along the riverbanks, fields of wheat began to ripple. Livestock pens were filled, and massive granaries rose toward the sky. People built temples, which the Sumerians called houses of the gods. In reality, these temples functioned like giant restaurants where day after day people brought fresh bread, roasted meat, and beer to sustain their creators. Life was grueling, but it had a clear purpose. Obedience was the ultimate virtue. If you dug the irrigation canals well and remained faithful with your offerings, the gods would bless you with rain and a bountiful harvest. Think of the ancient farmer who prayed every morning that his shovel wouldn't break. To him, a broken tool was a clear sign of divine displeasure. In this world, there was no concept of heaven or hell as we understand them today. There was only the eternal cycle of toil. People were born to work, to feed the gods, and then to pass away. Meanwhile, the gods lived in leisure within the luxury of their magnificent temples. But this perfect system eventually faltered. You see, the gods had overlooked one crucial detail. When they created humanity, they didn't set a limit on their lifespan. These early humans lived for centuries and multiplied at an incredible rate. In just 1,200 years, the world became hopelessly overcrowded. This is where the turning point occurs, a conflict that would forever change the way the gods viewed their creation. Sumerian texts describe it with startling bluntness. Humanity had become too noisy. Imagine millions of people constantly digging, shouting, building, singing, and bearing children. This endless cacophony rose all the way to the heavens. Enlil, the very god who once separated the sky from the earth, could no longer find peace. He suffered from agonizing insomnia. The noise of mankind irritated him so deeply that his annoyance turned into pure, cold hatred. It sounds almost trivial, a god losing his temper over some noise, but the consequences were catastrophic. Enlil summoned the council of the gods and declared that the roar of humanity was robbing him of his sleep. He demanded a reduction in their numbers. He decided to destroy the very beings who had been created to serve him. Enlil reached a breaking point and made a ruthless decision. He unleashed a devastating plague upon humanity. The sickness began to mow people down by the thousands, with victims collapsing in the fields and lining the city streets. But that's when Enki stepped in. He felt a fatherly bond with mankind. After all, they were his creation, his project, and he wasn't about to watch them go extinct. Secretly, Enki reached out to a wise man named Atrahasis and taught him how to fight back. His advice was clever. He told the people to stop praying to the other gods and focus all their offerings and sacrifices solely on the god of the plague. The gamble worked. Flattered by the undivided attention, the plague god called off the epidemic. Before long, humanity was thriving and growing noisy once again. Enlil was livid. Realizing someone was undermining his plans, he struck again, this time cursing the earth with a catastrophic drought. The rains vanished, the rivers ran dry, and the fields turned to dust. A horrific famine took hold. The ancient texts describe it in grim detail, claiming the hunger was so absolute that people were driven to eat their own children. Yet again, Enki intervened, finding a secret way to provide the people with water. This eternal tug-of-war between Enlil and Enki would go on to become the defining conflict at the heart of all Sumerian mythology. Driven to his absolute limit, Enlil decided to unleash his most terrifying weapon. He forced the high gods, the Anunnaki, to swear a sacred oath of silence. No one was to utter a single word to humanity about the coming catastrophe. Enlil's plan was simple: to wipe mankind from the face of the earth with a great flood. He would open the floodgates of heaven and drown the world. It seemed humanity was doomed. But Enki, the god of wisdom, found a brilliant loophole in his oath. While he could not speak to a human directly, nothing forbade him from speaking to objects. Enki approached the reed hut where his favorite mortal, Atrahasis, lay sleeping. Leaning close to the structure, he began to whisper to the very walls, "Reed fence, hear me. Wall, take heed. Tear down your house and build a boat. Forsake your possessions and save your life." It was a stroke of divine cunning. Waking to the voice echoing through the reeds, Atrahasis knew exactly what must be done. He gathered his carpenters and began constructing a massive vessel, sealing every seam with boiling bitumen to ensure it would hold against the coming storm. Atrahasis finished the ark just in time, right as the catastrophe broke loose. He brought his family aboard, along with seeds of every plant and animals of every kind. Then the heavens split open. The Sumerian accounts of the great flood are hauntingly vivid. The wind howled like a wild beast, darkness swallowed the earth, and the surging waters swept people away like stalks of reed. Even the gods were terrified by the destruction they had unleashed. They retreated to the highest heavens, cowering together in fear like wet dogs. The storm raged for 7 days and 7 nights. The entire world became a single, vast, and murky ocean, returning to the primordial state it had been in before time and the gods even existed. Everything was gone. Civilization and the great cities, built over ages by the Igigi and mankind, were wiped from the face of the earth. Enlil believed he had finally silenced the noise, that at last he could sleep. But as the waters began to recede, a horrifying realization struck the gods. They had destroyed the very creatures that provided for them. As the days went by, the gods began to feel the gnawing pain of hunger. Their temples lay in ruins, and there was no one left to bake bread or offer the scent of roasted meat. When Atrahasis's boat finally came to rest at the mountain's peak, he stepped onto dry land and immediately offered a sacrifice to the gods. He built a fire and roasted meat, letting the aroma drift up toward the heavens. It is here that the ancient texts offer a truly striking image. The gods caught the sweet scent and swarmed over the offering like flies. Just picture that for a moment. The great and terrible Anunnaki, the creators of worlds, standing there hungry and desperate, huddling around the fire of a mere mortal. They had realized that without humanity they could no longer survive. This was the turning point. Enlil, who was initially furious that anyone had survived the flood, finally relented. The gods realized they needed humanity just as much as humanity needed them. It was a symbiosis. But to ensure the world would never suffer from overpopulation again, Enki established new rules. From that moment on, childbirth became difficult and painful. Childhood diseases appeared, and certain priestesses were forbidden from ever bearing children. Human life was made short. This was the birth of the new global balance, the very one we still live in today. In the wake of the Great Flood, the world had to be rebuilt from the ground up. But this time, the gods chose a different path. Instead of ruling directly, they decided to govern through intermediaries. This gave rise to a central theme in Sumerian lore, the concept of kingship descending from the heavens. Mortals were chosen to serve as kings, acting as earthly vessels for the divine will. The first city to rise from the ruins was the sacred city of Eridu, dedicated to the god Enki. To cement this new order, the gods lowered the physical symbols of authority directly from the sky: the crown, the scepter, and the throne. These monarchs became the bridge between the celestial and the mundane. They commissioned the construction of massive stepped pyramids, known as ziggurats, monumental structures where priests climbed to the summits to commune with the gods. A striking feature of this system was that the king was not viewed merely as a ruler, but as the chief laborer. During sacred festivals, the king would symbolically carry a basket of clay, a humble reminder of humanity's original purpose. From the lowliest peasant to the highest sovereign, everyone was created to serve. This rigid hierarchy provided the order and stability necessary to sustain life in the new post-deluge world. But how, exactly, did the gods transmit the blueprints of civilization to humanity? Ancient Sumerian texts introduce a fascinating concept known as the me. While often translated as divine decrees, these were not merely abstract rules. They were physical objects, perhaps tablets or even crystals, that contained the essential data for every aspect of life. There was a me for architecture, a me for baking bread, and another for the art of music. There were even me for darker things like deception and prostitution. The ancients believed that everything, from advanced technology to complex human emotions, had been programmed into these artifacts by the gods themselves. The guardian of the me was Enki, the god of wisdom, who kept them within his subterranean palace in the city of Eridu. As long as he held them, the universe functioned with perfect precision. This concept is strikingly similar to modern computer software. Just as a device is useless without the right code, a city could not thrive without its corresponding me. In the ancient world, possessing these laws meant holding absolute power over reality itself. One of the most intriguing myths tells the story of how divine wisdom first reached the cities of man. It centers on Inanna, the goddess of love and war, and the patron of Uruk. Driven by a desire to see her city prosper, she paid a visit to Enki, the god of wisdom. Enki greeted her with a lavish feast, where the beer and wine flowed freely. As he grew intoxicated, his heart softened, and he became incredibly generous. Inanna seized the opportunity, asking him for the me, the sacred decrees of civilization. In his drunken stupor, Enki handed over more than 100 of these divine laws, including the secrets of writing, the arts, craftsmanship, and even the authority to rule over nations. Inanna quickly loaded the artifacts into her boat of heaven and made her escape. When Enki finally sobered up and realized what he had done, he was horrified. He dispatched his sea monsters to reclaim the treasures, but it was too late. Inanna reached Uruk, and the city began to flourish. This myth shatters the image of ancient gods as cold or flawless beings. The Sumerian gods drank, argued, felt envy, and cheated one another. They were remarkably human. They just happened to possess ultimate power. Now, let's venture into the place the Sumerians feared above all else. How did they envision life after death? For them, there was no radiant paradise or fiery hell. Instead, there was Kur, a vast, dark, and dusty cavern hidden deep beneath the earth. To reach it, A soul had to cross a subterranean river, much like the river Styx in Greek mythology. In the realm of Kur, eternal gloom and silence reigned supreme. It was ruled by the goddess Ereshkigal, the sister of Inanna. Sumerian texts paint a truly bleak picture of this place. The dead are described as being clothed in feathers like birds, trapped in a void where they never see the light. Their only food is dust and clay. It is a haunting vision. Whether you were a mighty king or a lowly slave, the same fate awaited everyone in the underworld, an eternity of chewing on dust. The only way to ease this suffering was through the offerings of the living. If descendants failed to pour fresh water at the grave, the soul was doomed to wander in an unending, agonizing thirst. This is why daily life in ancient Mesopotamia was steeped in ritual and driven by fear. People lived in constant dread of offending the gods or the spirits of their ancestors. Every morning began with a prayer and a humble offering. When illness struck, one didn't seek a doctor in the modern sense. They turned to a priest-exorcist. Disease was seen as a demon that had invaded the body, invited by the wrath of a god. The priest's task was to uncover the transgression. Perhaps the person had stepped in foul water or tasted forbidden food. To cast the sickness out, the priest would fashion a clay figurine of the demon, chant ancient incantations over it, and then shatter the effigy or cast it into the flames. In this world, magic was as tangible and essential as farming the land. People wore protective amulets and placed statues of winged bulls at their doorways to ward off evil spirits. Every sign, the flight of birds, the shifting shapes of clouds, or the behavior of animals, was interpreted as a coded message from the Anunnaki. The world was a living, breathing, and treacherous place. To survive, one had to navigate a life governed by thousands of sacred rules. How did these complex, profound texts end up being rebranded as stories about aliens in silver spacesuits? It all comes down to a massive misunderstanding in translation. In the 20th century, author Zecharia Sitchin published a series of books offering his own unique interpretation of Sumerian Tablets. He claimed the word Anunnaki meant those who from heaven to earth came, and even introduced the idea of the planet Nibiru with its 3,600-year orbit. But professional Sumerologists, scholars who spend their entire lives decoding cuneiform, find these claims utterly baffling. It's time to finally debunk this myth. The word Anunnaki is actually rooted in An, meaning sky, and Kai, meaning earth. It translates to offspring of princely seed, or simply children of heaven and earth. You won't find any mention of genetic labs or spaceships in the original texts. The flying chariots of the gods were metaphors for the wind and the storm. When an ancient poet described Enlil soaring through the sky, they were describing a massive thunderhead, a storm sweeping away everything in its path. To project our modern obsession with spaceflight onto the Sumerians is to disrespect their own rich, poetic, and mythological vision of the world. The true legacy of Sumerian texts is far more fascinating than any conspiracy theory. These clay tablets offer a front-row seat to the awakening of human consciousness. In the beginning, writing was born of necessity, a simple way to track sheep and sacks of grain. But as cuneiform evolved, it became something much deeper. People realized that these etched symbols could capture more than just inventory. They could record feelings, fears, and dreams. They began to write love poetry, philosophical inquiries into the meaning of life, and epic myths about the dawn of time. They used these tablets to grapple with the big questions. Why does it rain? Why do we die? Why must we toil? Their answers might seem strange or even haunting to us today. Visions of bio-robots made of clay and blood, or gods who thrived on the aroma of roasted meat. Yet, these were humanity's first tentative steps toward understanding our place in the universe. We are the children of these ancient texts. Many of their stories, the creation of man from the dust of the earth or the legend of a great flood, found their way into the world's most influential books, eventually becoming the very bedrock of modern religion. And now, we reach the most profound revelation of this story. The true twist isn't that gods descended from the heavens, it is that humanity, born from blood and clay to be nothing more than mindless servants, ultimately outlasted its own creators. The gods of Sumer have long since faded into shadow, their temples have crumbled into dust, and their names are forgotten by most. Yet we remain. We survived the floods, we conquered the plagues, and we learned to do more than just serve. We learned to build worlds of our own. These ancient texts are not merely records of celestial visitors, they are our birth certificate. They tell the story of how civilization was forged out of primal chaos through struggle and fear. Before the Anunnaki, the world was a dark void. Their arrival turned it into a grand, if brutal, machine. But it was within that machine that humanity first learned to think, to write, and to question. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the deep past. I hope this story has brought you peace and left you with something to ponder as you drift off. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next voyage through time. Be sure to like this video and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If we were originally created to serve the gods, what do you believe our purpose is today, now that the gods are gone? Until next time, sleep well.